I'm the tailorette, and I'm going to show you how I made this quilted jacket that I'm wearing right here. First, I took one of my favorite jackets from a couple years ago. I don't like how it fits now, but I like the general length and it just fits the proportions on my body. So I took a piece of paper, it's actually packing paper from Lowe's, and I threw my jacket on there. And I lined up the front zipper with the long straight edge, and I just started tracing where that front piece is in the front there. Folded it over, found the side seam, and started tracing where that side seam is as well. And I did that with the shoulder. I traced where the shoulder is, all the way around the neckline. I repeated this step for the back piece of the jacket as well. So assuming we did that, I proceeded to make my alterations to the front piece. And I made a drop shoulder, and I also made it more boxy on the sides, made the armhole a lot bigger so that it could have more of a relaxed drop shoulder. Then I took a piece of scrap fabric and I cut out my mock-up with the pieces that I had just created, and voila, we have our first mock-up. I labeled it mock-up number 1 because I had to make a few more alterations on the paper so that I could get rid of some of the flaws that I found in the fitting. Then it was time to wash my batting. And I wanted to have it all completely shrunk, but I decided to air dry it just so it wouldn't shrink too much. Then I started to make my pattern for my sleeve. I just literally drew a straight line going down and another straight line coming out from the armpit and measured how long I wanted it. And honestly, it turned out really great and there was no serious science behind it. And here I'm taking my mock-up apart because I'm taking all of the alterations that I made. I want it exactly how I made it. So I'm tracing it on another piece of paper, and this is going to be my official pattern. So I'm cutting out the pattern out so that I can actually start making my jacket out of the pieces that I had just created. So I'm taking my fashion fabric and I'm cutting it out on my batting and my lining as well, which I'm just doing in a solid white. I am inserting, as I'm editing this video, that the back piece of this jacket is literally cut in half. Just remember that the back piece is not all one piece because I need a center seam in the back of the jacket. So here I'm sewing one front piece to one back piece, and I'm doing this with my fashion fabric, my batting, and my lining, and I actually ended up sandwiching the lining, the batting, and my fashion fabric together, and here you will see I have them all layered, but I do not have the back seam together. I just realized I should be using flannel, not batting, so I switched it out. So in the mirror here, I have two samples. This is Quilter's batting, and this is flannel. And the Quilter's batting is a little bit more stiff, and I'm a little bit concerned that it'll make me look like I have football arms. But if you look at this, it drapes a little bit nicer. I'm going to stitch along the whole outer edge of this. And as you can see in the back, it is not stitched in the back. And then I'm gonna quilt the top. So I have all of these pieces put together, and then I'm gonna quilt it. So here I am measuring 4 inches from my front edge of my jacket, and I'm basically just following the ruler as I go down the jacket so I don't have to draw any lines. And then after I finished this, I basically started to measure 4 inches from the line that I just stitched, and I kept doing that until I was done. Then I started doing it the opposite direction so I could create squares. So here I'm doing the same thing but in the other direction, so I ended up with these beautiful squares. Now I'm on to my sleeves. I layered all my sleeves and I quilted my sleeves as well, sewed them right sides together. Now that they're sewn together, I wanted to finish off the inside of these seams, so I did more like a flat felled seam where I rolled it over and then I stitched it down by hand. Now I'm stitching my armholes wrong sides together and the back side of my jacket wrong sides together because I want my seams to show on the outside. I have it all pinned or sewn together. I'm gonna take it up in the back just a little bit because it was poking out way too far. If you want your jacket to be more boxy, now is the time to let it out in that back seam. It's just so much easier than messing with the armholes because then you gotta adjust the sleeves and the armholes. So I'm measuring my neckline so I can cut the collar, and I cut it at 21 inches, an inch larger than I measured, and I cut it out of the lining, the flannel, and the fashion fabric. And here you'll see I did not stitch one side of all of the layers, but I stitched the sides, the short sides, one long side, and another short side. And you'll see that this is why I'm doing it. I am pinning only the flannel and the fashion fabric to the neckline and leaving the inside of the lining open. If you're wondering why the lining was white and then all of a sudden turned out to be my outside fashion fabric, that's because I did switch it. I decided I wanted my lining to be the same as the outside fabric for the collar. So pause right there. I realized to finish sewing this on, I have to make the bias binding to go here. I either cover the seam with a white or I do it with this color. I'm not sure because I'm having a hard time matching this color. I couldn't even find it at the store. So I pinned some up here and some down here. And y'all tell me in the comments which one you would prefer. Now by the time you guys comment, I will already have the binding on, so no hard feelings. So I sewed the binding on the back, and here I am able to proceed with finish stitching the collar on. And I ended up pressing the collar upwards, and I took the inside lining and folded under, pressed it down and pinned it down all the way around the collar. And you'll see I ended up stitching it 1/8 of an inch away from the folded edge, and voila. Turns out the collar is not level with the front. So I took a ruler and marked with a pen, and then I just cut it off. And here I'm marking a curve for the top of the collar because I do not want it to be a square collar. So I'm making my lines and then I'm just cutting it off with a pair of scissors. Then I ended up repeating it on the other side by laying the side that was cut on top of the uncut, tracing it out, and then cutting it out once again. And I'll say I'm pretty happy with how it turned out, and so I decided to not only curve the top, but I curved the bottom of the jacket as well. So I could add the bias binding, which I added pretty much where there are all raw seams, including around the arms to finish off the edge. If you want to know how I make my bias binding, hit that subscribe button. I'm going to have a video coming out, but here I'm cutting out my pocket and I'm laying it down so that I can mark my curve on my pocket, because at the bottom of the pockets, I wanted it to be curved as well. So here I'm cutting out my curves, and now I'm on to cutting out my fashion fabric and the flannel as well. And I'm going to layer them together, the lining, the flannel, and the fashion fabric. And then I'm going to be stitching it and quilting it together. And then I stitched the bias binding around, all the way around the pocket so that it could match the rest of the jacket. Then I laid my pockets where I wanted them on the front, made sure they were the same distance in the front on both sides, then pinned it down and stitched it on the very outer edge 1/8 of an inch away from the edge. Voila, it's all done, and I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Hit that subscribe button if you did, and let me know in the comments below if you would like to see a pattern be published in this jacket.